With the cost of groceries soaring, it can be a challenge to eat healthy on a budget. But food and nutrition play a big role in bone and muscle health, so finding affordable options can make a big difference. I'm your host, Krista Lamb, and today on Unbreakable, the OC podcast from Osteoporosis Canada, we'll share some practical tips and strategies to help you save on your food bill without compromising on flavor and nutrition. I'll be chatting with Emily Richards, a professional home economist who develops recipes for Osteoporosis Canada, in addition to hosting the Cook with OC cooking demonstration webinar series. Welcome to the show, Emily. It is so lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Krista. I'm so happy to be here.
And so to start, I'm going to get you to tell us what a professional home economist is and what that means for people making food choices, because this was a new title for me. I'm really interested.
Well, a lot of people will think professional home economists, they'll think of economics and kind of go into that financial world, but it's a little bit all encompassing around the home is how I like to look at it. So it does include economics of the home, but it also includes every aspect of it. So things like food and nutrition, clothing, budgets. And it really is kind of all the offshoot of a family or the home. And I think I kind of joke sometimes and I say, think of it as an engineer, maybe a domestic engineer, so that, you have all the reach that an engineer would, but on the base of, in the kitchen and in the home.
And I love that. And I love that we're talking about cost, because I think everybody is thinking about cost right now. Like, cost of food seems to have skyrocketed. We're all thinking about how do we make healthy choices that we can afford. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about that and the work that you do there. So let's say I'm planning my trip to the grocery store. What are some of the things that you might suggest I consider even before I head out? Like, before I even leave the house, what should I be thinking about?
That's great. And I'm glad that you said like before even leaving the house, because that is a big one. Budget is on top of everyone's mind. And I think that it really does start before you leave the home. This is sometimes the hardest thing is planning and making a list. And that list doesn't mean necessarily just what you're getting outside of the house, but what you have inside already. So think of your kind of staple points, your freezer, your cupboard, even your refrigerator and those crispers. What do you have that are staples that you can create meals from? And specifically when you're, planning meals for yourself or for your family, it really starts with what you have at home. And I think that helps in the budget aspect. Once you know what you have, you can kind of build from that and then, go out into the world, into the grocery store and build more. And on that note, starting at home with things like your favorite family recipes, or if there's a magazine that you pull towards that you love those recipes, online recipes, favorite websites that you go to and you know that you're getting great recipes to build on that. And then, make a list for the week if you can. I think that's another key point is trying to, look at what you can do within the amount of time that's reasonable for you. If you know that you can only go to the grocery store once a week, then plan for that and, purchase things that will fit within that week.
Excellent. So those are some really good points. And I wanted to ask you about something that I hadn't really, as we were talking, I was thinking about, okay, before I leave the house, but I might not even be leaving the house to buy my groceries. Like, these days, where you get your groceries can change exponentially. So is it better for me to go to the grocery store, or is ordering online more economical? What's the difference there?
I think that, in today's world, we definitely have to think of, online shopping and things like that. And I think it's really what's best for you. So if you are very busy and you know that you can plan from home and order in groceries, then I think that's the best fit. So, kind of look at your overall budget. Again, still considering what you have at home. And maybe you only need to buy a few fresh things, and if you know that you have a great online way to do that, some people also, have CSAs where, they're part of a farm and they're getting those deliveries. So if you can incorporate those types of things to help save you money and budget your time as well as your funds that, you're using to get these things, then I think that that's fabulous. And you really don't always have to leave your home. You can have them, shipped in, ordered at your front door. And that looks different for everybody. If you are, a smaller household versus a larger household, there's a lot of people that will buy large quantities of proteins, let's say, and they have their freezer tucked downstairs, and they'll get that shipment maybe quarterly or once or twice a year, and that's based on their budget and what they can receive. And I think that that's fabulous if they're able to do that. The other thing to look at is if you are leaving the home and you're going to be purchasing groceries, is to take a look at, whether it's an actual paper flyer or an e-flyer, and see what's on sale, because that's going to drive where you go and what you're going to make. So I'm definitely a flyer shopper. I will look and see what's on sale this week and then guide what I'm going to make and purchase based on what's on sale. And that's a great way to kind of use seasonal products as well. So think of, produce and so fruits and vegetables that are in season, because that also helps your budget in the bottom line too.
And I know you've already given us some amazing tips already about how we can reduce the cost, but I wondered, are there other things that people should be thinking about in terms of strategies for saving money while they're shopping?
I think saving money while you're shopping is something that can happen once you hit the grocery store. To me, I sometimes think it's a little obvious, but it's not for everyone. And I think when you look, let's start with the produce section. You go there and, you're guided towards some seasonal products, which typically, when they're in season, they are a little bit less. So fill your cart with those types of things. But then you can also be driven to an area where there's discounted produce. So things that might have a few bruises, or, they're funny shapes of things. And um, I think that you can save a lot of money purchasing those items. But I also want to guide people to let them know that if you are purchasing those things, they are meant to be used fairly quickly. So you're not buying these on a Monday to be used, the following Saturday. They're there because they are meant to be used quickly. So in order to save the money, yes, you're purchasing them, but then use them, because if you don't, then that's money lost, because they might start to discolor or they might get softer and things like that. So you kind of have to think about those types of things. Same goes with discounted meats. If you're in the refrigerated section where you see all those beautiful proteins and they're 30% off or 40% off, purchase them. That's fabulous, but have a plan. If you don't, make sure you have freezer space, because that's a big one. I often think, oh, this chicken, this steak is on sale, I should get it. And if I don't have a plan, I know that I have space in the freezer for it. And again, so there's things that happen in the grocery store that you might not know till you get there. And there's those types of specials online as well. There's different ways that you can purchase, odd vegetables and things like that that you get a discount for. And I think that, it all goes back to that plan, Krista. You need to have a plan.
So, starting before I even leave the house really is important. And I think with osteoporosis and with anyone who's dealing with a health condition, you're thinking often about nutrient dense foods. You're thinking about how do I get the most value for my health and affordability in that sense as well. So, I would love to know if there are any tips around how to get those nutrient dense foods maybe within your budget.
Yes, I think that's a big one. We have, if it's not ourselves, maybe family members that, we're incorporating into these shops and health conditions. And I think that when you think of nutrient dense foods, I like to think of, and this may sound silly, but real food or whole foods. So, think of things like an apple or, a steak or chicken breast, those types of things that are not processed typically is something that you can look towards. And I also like to think of it as kind of the outside of the grocery store. So, not the physical outside, but when you go into the store, those kind of four walls, three walls. So, you think produce, meats, typically, dairy. And so that really kind of helps guide you in budgeting to create healthy meals. And we can't forget the frozen section because that's really where we have a lot of, produce in there, the vegetables, as well as the fruits, which are fabulous. Now we think of processed foods. They're processed, but they're processed, at the highest peak of freshness so that they have all the nutrients that retain there, but sometimes at a reduced cost for us. So if you're picking up a bag of frozen vegetables, year round, let's say for $3, as a small household, you might be able to eat a few times from that. Whereas buying perhaps a fresh head of broccoli, for the same price, you might not get the same amount there. So I think that we want to kind of pack a punch when we think of nutrient dense foods and create real meals from it. And a lot of that, what I talked about earlier about looking for those discounted things in the store really help bring that together.
And I'm going to guess that some of this, because you mentioned families, is going to be relevant to the size of your family. Because when I'm shopping for myself and my husband. We don't have to think too much about how to stretch the dollar for many, many mouths. But what if you have a larger family? Are there suggestions that you have for that?
Yes, I think larger families sometimes do kind of run into that um, dilemma of, we need a little bit more food, and there's ways to kind of bulk things up and kind of stretch your dollar. So I'll give an example of, let's say, chili. I love chili. You can use, let's say, for a family of 6 or 8, you might use a couple pounds of ground beef or ground chicken, whatever protein you want to use. And then if you were just to make that, it would be a good portion for everybody. But to extend it, I might add, instead of 2 cans of beans, 4 cans of beans. And that kind of reduces my cost, but I'm going to get that much more because every can of beans has about 2 cups. Or to reduce my budget even further, I can actually cook dried beans and then add those. So there's little things that you can do to kind of extend to, help feed a larger family, still getting the nutrients that you want. In this case, definitely protein. You're going to get some great fiber there. And you know what? Add some cheese on there, and you're going to get some great calcium to, get strong bones, which is fabulous. And I think that that's kind of what we need to think about overall is, we want this food to be sustainable for us, like to help sustain our bodies and also to feel good and healthy. And I think, keeping that in mind when you're shopping. Now, you can also do the exact same for a smaller household. You can still make those big batches and save money, but now maybe you're going to freeze some of those portions so that you have food for later. And you know what? Who doesn't love taking out something from the freezer for a quick lunch and just enjoying it?
Yes, absolutely. I think that that's really so smart and great tips. And you mentioned beans, which made me think about food staples in the pantry and things that maybe we want to think about always having on hand so that we can make good choices, but that are also maybe affordable choices.
Yes, I always think I say pantry, and oftentimes we might think of pantry as like a cupboard. But I want you to kind of extend that pantry to the freezer and to your fridge and counter, really. So, I think of things like potatoes and onions and carrots and celery, those things that kind of have the long stand of either in the fridge or in the counter in a cupboard. And then when we look to, a dry pantry, things like tomato sauce or canned tomatoes, beans, canned tuna, canned salmon, a lot of those are really the base building blocks of great, delicious recipes. And when you look to the freezer, that's where you can see more of those heavier proteins in there. So things like, ground beef or chicken, some steaks maybe that you found on sale, and taking a little bit and creating those meals. And I think it's difficult to get great food on the table if you don't have food at home, right? So if you can keep a little bit of these pantry staples on hand, it really does become easier. I know I love having canned tomatoes because I love pasta, and, adding a little bit of a ground protein or some leftover chicken into a sauce kind of helps bulk that up. And then why not throw a can of beans in there too? Because I'm going to get the added bonus of, that little bit of extra fiber in there. And it's always a great place if you have those little bit of vegetables lurking in the crisper, chop them up and make a soup and then add another can of beans because you're going to get a little bit of protein in there too, which is nice.
And I'll ask you the thing that came to mind as I was thinking, because like we talk about pantries and we talk about, freezer space and all of these things. What about those of us like myself who live in smaller place, like have a smaller place? Like I have a teeny tiny kitchen. I love it, but it is not the best for storage. Are there any options for those of us with the small kitchens?
Yeah, I think definitely, again, we're going to go back to planning, Krista. We have to plan and plan for space and what is best. So this is also then takes you to when you're shopping, you're not going to buy the big club size of something because you can't, you can't fit it in. And I think if you have a neighbor or a family member that you can share things with, I do it with my mom. I'll buy something larger and then we'll split it. So we've saved the money by buying something larger, but she doesn't have a big freezer. So she'll take a little bit and I'll take a little bit extra so I can feed my family. And I think it's a great way to be neighborly, but also to save a little bit of money. If you have a friend group that you want to not only share recipes with, but why not share food? Maybe you found a big bag of rice on sale and you want to divvy it up. And so you all get some based on the amount of space that you have. So I think it's a great way to have interaction with friends and family, or to maybe create a new group based on this. And we all know that we need that interaction a little bit more. And I think food is a great way to do that because it puts everybody on the same level as opposed to kind of, someone who cooks and who doesn't, because we all need to eat.
That is true, and I am someone who does not cook, so I love hearing that. My husband is, I'm very lucky that he takes care of that side of things. But as we start to get to the end of this conversation, and I can't believe we're almost at the end of this conversation, I wanted to check in with you and see, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you think would be important for our listeners to know about this topic?
Oh, wow. I mean, really, this topic, we could go on forever, Krista, because it's one of my favorite topics. And I think that just kind of practice. You have to practice the planning part. Maybe just take a couple days at a time. And when I say planning, it literally is for me, it's sitting down with a pen and paper, making some notes, going through things, going through cookbooks. If you have a larger family, get them to participate. It's actually really fun. I've done it with my kids over the past long time. And, we sit at the table, get them to look through some cookbooks or get them to look online at their favorite TikTok contributor. What are we going to try to make and what are we going to try to do? You can kind of make a game of it if you have younger kids and say, let's see what we can find in the fridge today and make, a frittata for dinner because eggs are something a lot of people have on hand. So I really think it's, don't get frustrated. It really is, as they say, you're not a rocket scientist. You just have to relax a little bit and that comfort level will come with, the practice that you do about budgeting and you'll get better at it. We all get better, practice makes perfect. And shopping around and finding out what you like and, get your core recipes and just cook for yourself because you are the one eating. If you can find someone like you, Krista, that cooks for you, that's even better.
I highly recommend it, yes.
Or start a little group and, maybe there's 4 great friends. You guys get together and cook and then divide the food. That interaction to me is very special. And then you guys can talk about, hey, where the next big, sale is for, I'm sure clothes might come into into this discussion too, but for sure for food and look for those specials.
Yeah, those are some amazing tips. And I think everyone listening today will really appreciate this. I know I've learned some really cool things that I'll be keeping in mind the next time I'm going off to the grocery store. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, thanks so much, Krista. And I hope you get to shop a little bit more and enjoy some good dinners.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Krista Lamb, and you've been listening to Unbreakable, the OC podcast from Osteoporosis Canada. Today, I've been speaking with Emily Richards about eating well on a budget. If you'd like more information on osteoporosis, visit our website at osteoporosis.ca. If you have questions or comments about this topic or about our podcast, reach out to us on our website or via social media. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Enjoying the show? Hit subscribe in the podcast provider of your choice. Thanks for listening.